It is 7 o'clock. Good to see you this morning. And it is yet another big day for Rishi Sunak, who'll be facing Keir Starmer in his first Prime Minister's questions at noon. Mr Sunak has promised to fix the mistakes made by his predecessor and started by clearing out half of our cabinet. In just a couple of moments, I'll be speaking to one of the survivors, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. It is Wednesday, the 26th of October.
I'm on Downing Street, where the new cabinet is about to meet for the first time, with experienced ministers like Dominic Raab and Michael Gove back in the fold.
Just 7 women are included in Sunak's top team, including Suella Braverman, reappointed as Home Secretary 6 days after she was sacked for breaking the ministerial code. Plus, Rishi Sunak gets an invitation to visit Kyiv from President Zelensky, one of the Prime Minister's first calls after entering number 10.
I'm here in North London at the country's biggest Hindu temple to hear what it means to the community about having the first British Asian Prime Minister.
Also ahead, peers question whether Princes Andrew and Harry should be allowed to stand in for the King on official duties. No tolerance of hate speech. Adidas cuts its ties with the rapper Kanye West after a slew of anti-Semitic comments. Plus, the natural world at its most spectacular. Taking a bite out of the sun, the best eclipse pictures from around the world. And hitting the right note, world champion Tyson Fury hopes that Sweet Caroline will become the England World Cup anthem. Morning all. Rishi Sunak will be chairing his first cabinet this morning before going on to face Keir Starmer in the Commons at Prime Minister's questions. The new PM has promised to prioritise economic stability and confidence, but warned this does mean difficult decisions to come. Well, let's head straight to our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, who's braving Downing Street for us this morning. Good to see you, Ali. Yeah, so a busy day.
Yeah, morning. A busy day. 9:30, that is when the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is going to meet his cabinet for the very first time. All together, we're expecting them to come in shortly. And as I was saying, there are some familiar faces from the past, people like Dominic Raab, people like Michael Gove. This is a Prime Minister who I think in part wants continuity. Some of the people that are coming in are those that already are familiar with the brief. For example, Dominic Raab, who's going back to justice, Steve Barclay, who's going back to health. But also, I think a Prime Minister that wants to show he's reaching out to different parts of the party, including, for example, Suella Braverman, who is back as Home Secretary. Now, that has been quite controversial. I think this is something that Labour have been sharpening their attack lines on overnight. They say that this is someone who just a week ago broke the ministerial code, had to be sacked by Liz Truss for sharing information on a private phone. That is something that I'm sure will come up potentially at Prime Minister's questions. That will be a big moment for Rishi Sunak. The first time he goes head-to-head against Keir Starmer. That's happening at noon. These are two people who are known to have their eye on the details. So it could be a very different kind of Prime Minister's questions as Rishi Sunak heads into his first proper day in the job.
Many thanks indeed. Now, of course, one of the people to keep his cabinet job yesterday was the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. Very pleased to say he joins us now. And, well, congratulations, Mr. Cleverly.
Thank you very much.
I have to ask, what happens when you go in? I'm just personally interested in this. What happens when you pop in to see the Prime Minister? I mean, presumably the heart is pounding as you walk up Downing Street, but what did he say?
Well, by convention, the conversations we have in the cabinet room are private. But look, I've known Rishi for a long while. He commented on the work that we've been doing at the Foreign Office, and it is a proper team effort at the Foreign Office. I'm the person that sits on the sofa, but there's a big team there, and we've got a lot of work on. He wanted continuity. And of course, I'm absolutely delighted to stay in the role and to serve under him as Prime Minister.
Now, given, of course, the fact that you have been remaining in role, I have no compunction about asking you a couple of questions on the brief. Peter Tatchell, of course, a gay rights campaigner of many, many years' reputation, stopped in Qatar. What is your understanding of what actually took place there? Because he appears to be claiming that he was arrested. The Qatari authorities say something slightly different.
Well, I'm going to get the detail. I'm going to be a bit careful about the comments I make on that until I get the full detail. We have been working very closely with the Qatari government and the authorities around the football. They are very, very keen to make sure that fans who are going there to enjoy the football do so and stay safe. I will look into detail of what happened with Peter Tatchell. Obviously, he wanted to make a point about gay rights. These are incredibly important points and issues that I have raised with the Qataris directly, but I want to get the full details before I comment further.
Just in terms of the way in which you've raised these particular issues with the Qatari authorities, I mean, how do you feel it is best, how the West is best placed to try and effect some changes in a part of the world that we are very, very close to?
Well, look, we have incredibly important partners in the Middle East that used to be the part of the world that I worked with when I was the minister previously in the Foreign Office. And look, these are Muslim countries. They have a very different cultural starting point for us. I think it's important when you're a visitor to a country that you respect the culture of your host nation. We do talk to them about our values and why we believe it's important that people's rights from all kinds of communities are respected, and of course it will be something that we continue to talk to them about. But ultimately, they are very, very keen to make sure that football fans have an enjoyable experience, and they have made a number of compromises to facilitate that.
Let's, of course, talk now about the events of the past 24, 48 hours. Sure. Rishi Sunak, before entering Downing Street yesterday, pledged to govern with integrity, professionalism and accountability. How can you square that with the reappointment of Suella Braverman?
Well, Suella made a mistake. She has said herself that she made a mistake. She's apologised for that mistake, and she stood down at the time. But ultimately, she has, I think, got very, very clear ideas about how we improve the performance of the Home Office, both in terms of border control, policing, how we make sure we crack down on crime. She's very passionate about that, got a very clear agenda for that, and it's clear that the Prime Minister wanted to see that delivered.
This was no minor mistake. She was sacked on the advice of the Cabinet Secretary after not just sharing from her personal email, but for pre-releasing details of a ministerial statement. So I'll ask it again. When Rishi Sunak talks about displaying integrity, professionalism and accountability in government, you're not telling me that she's the best person for the job, given she was sacked for not being very good at it a handful of days ago.
Well, look, she has said that she made an error. She has apologised for that, and the Prime Minister has clearly taken the apology at in the manner that she wanted to put across. She has shown a willingness to take responsibility for what happened, but ultimately he has decided that he wants to see the agenda that she has set out, that very important crime-fighting agenda, back in the heart of government.
She is back in Cabinet, isn't she? Because she provided her endorsement for Rishi Sunak ahead of him becoming Prime Minister. That's the simple truth of this, isn't it?
Well, if you look at the parliamentary numbers, it was clear, and clear really very, very early on, that Rishi was going to have the majority, and as it went on to be clear, the overwhelming majority of the support of the parliamentary party. Frankly, I don't think he needed the endorsement of any one MP.
That is one way to look at it.
Yeah, well, it's the way to look at it because the numbers speak for themselves. He had a clear lead.
She gets sacked for a significant security breach. She meets with Rishi Sunak. She provides her endorsement for Rishi Sunak. She finds herself back in Cabinet in 6 days. Genuinely, people will be watching this, screaming at the television at the idea that their intelligence is being insulted by the fact that she was returned to Cabinet on the basis of her strengths rather than on the basis of the endorsement. I mean, even if it didn't take place, that's what it looks like.
Well, look, I can't control people's perception of events. What I can see, what I saw, is that Rishi didn't basically need any endorsements. And actually, look, my appointment showed I supported someone else. Now, I know Rishi is an incredibly smart politician. He was an incredibly experienced Chancellor and has got a very clear understanding of what we need to do to get the British economy in the place where we want it to be. Now, but I endorsed someone else. Nevertheless, he asked me to stay in my position. The simple truth of the matter is he didn't need any particular endorsements because it was so clear that the parliamentary party wanted him at the helm.
There will be people, however, then, even if they take that at face value, who question the integrity, the probity of a new Prime Minister who returns someone to one of the great offices of state, let's not forget, a handful of days after she was sacked from it. I mean, is there that much of a lack of talent in Conservative ranks these days that Suella Braverman is truly the only person who can do the job?
Well, look,
that's what it looks like.
Well, you want to be critical of us politicians, and of course that is an important part of the function of scrutiny. But the simple fact of the matter is, Suella has a very, very clear idea and set out a very clear agenda about getting control of our borders, which is incredibly important. Cracking down on crime, which is incredibly important. She made an error. She apologised for that, and it's clear that the commitment that she's made to crack down on crime is an important one for all of us, and that's why the Prime Minister appointed.
But does this mean that Rishi Sunak will be appointing an ethics advisor? I mean, presumably not.
Well, ultimately, an ethics advisor, people keep using this as if it's some kind of, foundation stone of government.
I suspect they'd have something to say about the reappointment of Suella Braverman.
Well, the point is we have a system, Cabinet Secretary, there is a whole system in terms of propriety and ethics within government, and having one additional person in what is already a multi-individual function, I'm not convinced is the golden bullet or the silver bullet rather, that some people suggested.
Let's talk about the biggest pressing issue facing the country at the moment, the cost of living crisis.
Sure, yeah.
We had been led to believe that we would be getting a statement from the Chancellor on Halloween. Reports this morning that it could be delayed. What's your understanding of where we are?
Well, I haven't had specific confirmation of dates, but obviously just yesterday we had a new Prime Minister. He's going through the appointment of his government. He, of course, will want to take some time to work on the detail of that. He's been Chancellor. He will, of course, have a very good understanding of the figures. He'll be working closely with Jeremy in terms of the production of that.
Sounds like you're suggesting it might.
But we know it needs to come soon. We know people want certainty. We know people want a clear idea of the government's plans. Whether it happens exactly on that date, I'm not able to confirm at the moment.
What is your understanding then of the joint approach, the joint Sunak-Hunt approach, and all of this? I mean, listening to the Prime Minister yesterday on outside Number 10, I'll admit to being a little confused. I mean, this is what he said. He was talking about giving us a stronger NHS, better schools, safer streets, control of our borders, protecting our environment, supporting our armed forces. I mean, all of that surely requires real-term spending increases, which is the one thing we're not going to be getting.
Well, so I think it's really important that we
improving our schools.
Yeah, so good government cannot just be about spending lots more money. We have to make sure that those public services, the public services on which we all rely, work effectively, efficiently, and are very, very delivery focused. But we can't just keep giving, above inflation spending increases. The maths just precludes that from happening. So yes, we have to make sure that we keep a close eye on public expenditure, but also what we've got to do is make sure we keep a close eye on being very, very delivery focused. They are not mutually exclusive.
Sure, but when Jeremy Hunt talks about making very, very difficult decisions, we all know what that is code for, and it is cuts to public spending. I mean, we heard again from the Prime Minister yesterday that he feels that there is a mandate that flows from the 2019 manifesto and election. The one thing that anyone who voted Conservative back in 2019 did not vote for was austerity.
Well, we've got to remember that between the 2019 election and now, we have had the furlough scheme. We have spent billions, hundreds of billions of pounds, keeping people's families together economically, keeping people in their jobs, making sure businesses don't go under. So we have had a massive, massive, massive increase in public spending already. And we can't just pretend that away. Those challenges were then made worse by the economic implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we can't just pretend that expenditure has not happened. We will continue to support people who we know are struggling economically, people who we know are worried about the future. And we will, of course, support them, but we can't just pretend that massive amount of public expenditure hasn't already happened.
I think I know the answer to this question, but it strikes me that if you wanted to put forwards, a package of public spending cuts, one thing you need is a mandate. Given that the mandate was not provided by the 2019 manifesto, why shouldn't there be a general election now, barring the fact that the Conservative Party, going by the polling, would be wiped out?
Because you always have to make dynamic decisions in government. You can't set out a manifesto and assume that nothing significant is going to happen over the 4 or 5 years of a
There will be
parliament.
tax rises. There'll be no public spending cuts. There will be public
spending
cuts.
There was no global pandemic in the 2019 manifesto. There was no invasion of Ukraine in the 2019 manifesto.
Fracking wasn't in the manifesto.
We have got to respond to the world as we find it, not the one we wish it to be. And there have been 2 huge global events, and they are affecting countries right across the world. I was on the phone yesterday to my opposite numbers across the globe, and we are all facing these difficulties, and we all have to deal with them.
But as Rishi Sunak admitted yesterday, before he entered number 10, mistakes were made, and mistakes were made by the Conservative government, which exacerbated the financial situation. I do just want to conclude on one thing, though, and you mentioned it en passant earlier, that you did support someone else, that you supported Boris Johnson. I have to ask, you must have received some assurances that he was going to stand. When he announced that he was not, how did that make you feel? I mean, he hung Nadeem Zahawi out to dry.
Well, we could see that the support that he was getting was around the 100 mark. That was enough for him to stand. His intention, the conversations I had with him, his intention was to stand.
Come on, don't tell me you weren't a bit annoyed.
Well, look, I was disappointed he didn't put himself forward, but ultimately it was becoming clear, even on the Sunday, Monday, it was becoming increasingly clear that the Parliamentary Party overwhelmingly wanted to see Rishi Sunak at the helm. We absolutely respect that. Rishi is, as I say, an experienced, thoughtful and energetic politician. I'm very, very happy to serve in his government.
James Cleverly, good to see you. We'll let you crack on a busy day. Thanks very much. Now let's have a quick look at the papers, and we start with The Telegraph. Rishi Sunak vows to fix the mistakes made under Liz Truss in his first Downing Street address. That's in The Telegraph. Now, The Times too, making that pledge, its front page lead story. The Guardian, it calls the reshuffle a gamble, restoring experienced hands to cabinet, including Suella Braverman, just days after she was forced to resign for breaching the ministerial code. Here's the Star. It likens the cabinet reshuffle to the hokey-cokey, as Mr Sunak puts some in and puts some out, shakes it all about. While The Sun imagines the new Prime Minister talking to Larry, the Downing Street cat, telling him, at least I got rid of the other Mog, reference, of course, to Jacob Rees. Now, Rishi Sunak is, of course, the UK's first Prime Minister of Asian heritage and the first Hindu to hold the office. Sky Sabah Chowdhury is at the UK's biggest Hindu temple for us this morning. Sabah, good to see you. So what's been the reaction?
Good morning, Neil. Well, Rishi Sunak becoming the first Hindu Prime Minister coincides with the celebration of Diwali. It's celebrated by Hindus, Sikhs, Jains. It's a 5-day celebration that celebrates the triumph of good over evil. And it's why the temple behind me, Kingsbury Temple, is rather busy at the moment for this time in the morning, for almost 7:20, because it's a 5-day celebration. Now, joining me is a teacher who works at Kingsbury Temple. Her name is Jashu. Jashu, thank you for joining me on Sky News. Now, earlier I had a look at the display that is behind us, and I saw a picture of Rishi Sunak just over there. Why is that there, and what does that mean to you?
Well, in the display, we also have our Acharya Purushottam Priyadas Swamiji, who is our inspirator. And alongside him, we decided that we're going to put the Queen, as we're celebrating Commonwealth nations, and Rishi Sunak as well, because it's important to have visible leaders to showcase and be inspirational and be role models for the future generation.
And you're also a teacher, Saturday school teacher here at the Temple. What does it mean for you as an educator? to your Indian students? Is this something that you think that they can aspire towards? And what's the general sentiment amongst the children?
Whether it's for hope of greater diversity or inclusion, or whether you're just being inspired that at such a young age he's achieved so much, I think it's something for the future generation, for the children to know that they can have their dreams, dream big, and go for the stars really, and reach for the stars, because anyone can now be a Prime Minister. It's something for them to aspire to, and we just wish Rishi Sunak the best and hope that he can get some positive outcomes for our country.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us on Sky News, Jashu. Now, Mr. Sunak is, it has been reported widely, he is a proud Hindu. He, just yesterday when he was made king officially, when he met King Charles III yesterday and became Prime Minister officially, there were some Diwali sweets that were on offer. He's often seen wearing a red bracelet, which is known as a Narajari, on his wrist, and also in 2020 outside number 11 when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, he lit some diwas outside his home, which are basically some oil lamps, and had decorated number 11 Downing Street too. So Rishi Sunak becoming the first Hindu Prime Minister, it means a lot to the people here that I've spoken to, but more generally speaking, questions will of course be raised about his level of support. He was voted in by MPs rather than the general public in a general election, and also another question to consider is when it comes to policies, how much will his cultural background matter?
Sam, thanks very much indeed. Now, all eyes will, of course, be on the House of Commons a little later today when, barely 24 hours into the job, Rishi Sunak will be facing the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, in Mr Sunak's first Prime Minister's questions. We'll have live coverage here on Sky News from midday. But still to come, how will Rishi Sunak be limbering up for Prime Minister's questions? I'll be speaking to two former special advisers who've been there and done it. The NHS needs you at 7:45. We'll hear about the volunteers helping their community this winter and how you can join them. And later on, the former world heavyweight boxing champion, Vitaly Klitschko, tells us about the biggest fight of his life, defending his country from Russian invasion. Well, let's stick with Ukraine. And one of Rishi Sunak's first calls as Prime Minister was to the country's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, who he promised the UK's continued support in its war against Russia. And he received an early invitation to visit Kyiv.
Just before recording this address, I spoke with the new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I believe that the partnership between our countries and the already traditional British leadership in the defence of democracy and freedom will continue to strengthen. Ukraine and Britain have achieved the best relations so far, but there is still potential to increase our cooperation to bring more benefits to our societies. I invited the Prime Minister to visit Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the Secretary-General of NATO has told Sky News that reports of a possible nuclear attack in Ukraine risk what he called a very serious escalation. Jens Stoltenberg was speaking to our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes during a NATO exercise in the Adriatic.
Strength counts when Russia's watching. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. It's part of a NATO mission that's come into sharper focus since Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Paying the warship a visit, the head of the alliance said the goal is to deter threats. He shared concerns about a false claim by Russia that Ukraine is planning to use a radioactive dirty bomb on its own territory.
Russia has accused others for things they intend to do themselves, so we need to monitor closely what Russia now do, and they must know that use of dirty bomb or a radiological bomb is a serious escalation.
With so much uncertainty, the pilots flying these F-18s face the possibility of one day fighting with Russia in air-to-air combat for real.
It's daunting. All we do out here is train to get ready for a fight that might come. And I mean, I think if it comes pilot to pilot, I hope that we're the better man in the box.
In the past few days, US jets have flown close to Russia, while 2 Russian warships have watched the carrier from a distance. No one wants conflict, but everyone's aware of the risks.
We're always ready to execute the full spectrum of maritime operations.
So you'd be ready to go to war if the call came?
If we are directed, certainly that's what we prepared for. But what we are also here is to bring peace and stability, because that's what we do.
The hope is that showing NATO is ready and able to fight means it won't have to. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, on board USS George H.W. Bush.
Time for a quick look at some of the day's other headlines now. And Prince Harry and Prince Andrew's royal duties have been discussed in Parliament for the first time, as Lords have questioned whether the dukes should be allowed to perform official duties for the King. Peers in the Lords asked if Harry and Andrew should remain as councillors of state. The Labour peer Viscount Stansgate raised the issue in the House of Lords, asking if the government planned to amend the Regency Act.
Is the government happy to continue with a situation where the councillors of state and regency powers may be exercised by the Duke of York or the Duke of Sussex, one of whom has left public life and one of whom has left the country? So is it not time, my lords, for the government to approach the King and see if a sensible amendment can be made to this act?
A woman says she froze after Harvey Weinstein took her into a hotel bathroom and raped her just hours after they'd met. She was a witness at the former film producer's trial in Los Angeles, where he faces 11 charges of rape and sexual assault. He is already serving a 23-year sentence for sex offences against women. A new report says that governments and companies are continuing to prioritise the use of fossil fuels, despite the severe damage to people's health caused by climate change. The Lancet Countdown, released ahead of COP27 in Egypt next week, warns that countries subsidised fossil fuels to the tune of $400 billion in 2019. Welcome back. A quick reminder as to our top stories. And Rishi Sunak will assemble his cabinet for the first time this morning as he gets to work tackling his hefty in-train. Then all eyes shift to the House of Commons as he faces Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions for the very first time. And in one of his first calls as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak received an invitation to Kiev from President Zelensky. Now, of course, we've just seen the Prime Minister putting together his cabinet, and one of the most controversial appointments has to be Suella Braverman, back as Home Secretary 6 days after being sacked for breaking the ministerial codes. A little earlier, I spoke with the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. He told me she had apologised and said the new PM trusted her vision.
Well, look, she has said that she made an error. She has apologised for that, and the Prime Minister has clearly taken the apology at in the manner that she wanted to put across. She has shown a willingness to take responsibility for what happened, but ultimately he has decided that he wants to see the agenda that she has set out, that very important crime-fighting agenda, back in the heart of government.
Suspicion that story may well crop up at Prime Minister's questions today. But of course, we also asked the Foreign Secretary about the economic strategy that Mr Sunak will be developing and whether or not that financial statement would be going ahead on Halloween, the 31st of October, as originally intended. Here's what he said.
Well, I haven't had specific confirmation of dates, but obviously just yesterday we had a new Prime Minister. He's going through the appointment of his government. He, of course, will want to take some time to work on the detail of that. He's been Chancellor. He will, of course, have a very good understanding of the figures. He'll be working closely with Jeremy in terms of the production of that.
Sounds like you're suggesting it might.
But we know it needs to come soon. We know people want certainty. We know people want a clear idea of the government's plans. Whether it happens exactly on that date, I'm not able to confirm at the moment.
Well, let's head back to Downing Street, where we'll discover Ali Fortescue. And Ali, let's try and talk about two things, if we can, at the same time. First, of course, I think that Suella Braverman story will run and run. But, of course, the priority for the man who lives in the building behind you, Rishi Sunak, is sorting out the economy. And there will be some who are slightly concerned the moving, or the potential that 31st of October financial statement might have to be moved.
Yeah, let's start on the economy. The Times are reporting that that statement's been moved. Of course, Halloween was the moment that we were going to get a sense of how the government planned to steady the economy, and the warning was that that could well mean a spending squeeze, warnings even that we could see austerity harking back to George Osborne times, or even worse, after Liz Truss's pretty disastrous economic policies. So that is the warning, but at the moment the Treasury are not confirming, and nor is James Cleverly. It sounds like they are trying to work out whether it can happen on Monday. He said, we know it needs to come soon, but I'm not able to confirm if it's going to come on Monday. And he was keen to point to global events. He said that we have to deal with things as we find them. So I think expect a potentially painful statement if that does happen on Monday. I think the reason it needs to happen on Monday is because the Bank of England on Thursday are looking at interest rates, which could be raised further, which could impact mortgages. You talked to about Suella Braverman very briefly. I think that is something that Labour are going to be focusing in on at Prime Minister's questions. This is a Home Secretary who a week ago was sacked under Liz Truss for breaching the ministerial code, for sharing information on a personal phone, and they are saying this is someone, Rishi Sunak, he says he wants to be different, wants to show professionalism. Is it right that she has been brought back into the fold?
Ali, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's reflect then, get an insider's view of the Cabinet reshuffle and look ahead to Prime Minister's questions. The first outing, always an interesting one for a new Prime Minister. Giles Wilkes is a former economic advisor to Theresa May in Number 10. Catherine MacLeod was an advisor to Alistair Darling when he was Chancellor for Labour. Lovely to see you both. Giles, I'll come to you first, however. Let's start with the reappointment, I should say, of Suella Braverman. What do you make of it? I mean, we are being told, and I was told at great length, that this was nothing to do with securing an endorsement from the right of the party, and instead just that Mr Sunak truly believes in her policies.
I find that slightly difficult to believe, because we all know how tight things were over the weekend. It was only a few days ago that we weren't absolutely clear that Boris Johnson was going to pull out of the race. And if he had got into the race and made it to the final two, all the betting was that Boris Johnson would be looking at becoming Prime Minister within the next few days. So Suella Braverman's endorsement of Rishi Sunak was arguably the most important endorsement of the entire race. And so it's very hard to believe that such an important political choice of hers didn't have any say at all in this rather controversial decision of his. So, you know, some people were saying when she was originally sacked last week that it was a technical breach. It wasn't a particularly important one. It looked like a pretty serious one to me, in that she was sharing information and, in a sense, trying to attack her own government's policy by sharing it with people who didn't agree with it. But, you know, a new Prime Minister, he must think, I can draw a clean slate over everything. There's not going to be, that people won't talk about it for more than a few weeks. I think Labour are going to use it for a great deal longer than that.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, if we wanted an example of a Prime Minister who thinks, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, this cabinet is one of them. But is it sustainable in the long term? Or do you see, as others are suggesting this morning, that this is just a first stage, that we will be seeing a much larger reshuffle perhaps in a couple of months' time?
Well, it's very hard to see at this stage how Suella Braverman can survive. She's the minister responsible for security and policing. She's breached breached security herself. James Cleverly was on your programme a minute ago saying she said sorry, so that's okay then. Well, what have the criminals of the land going to see when standing up in court? We're sorry, it's okay. The Home Secretary's got off with it, so we can too. It's a very odd appointment, and I think it demonstrates that he's doing more to appease the Conservative Party than he cares about the country, because he's going to get off to a very bad start because she's a discredited politician. She's not the only one. in his cabinet. Gavin Williamson also breached the rules. So for our Prime Minister, who set great store by integrity and accountability and professionalism, I think it's a mistake.
Giles, let's talk then about the greatest item on the new Prime Minister's to-do list, sorting out the economy. And we did see sterling strengthening against the dollar just on the announcement of his appointment to Prime Minister. I mean, the markets are certainly a bit calmer than they were, but we are still in this kind of interim period where we haven't had the 31st of October financial statement. It looks like it's not going to happen on that date. We haven't had the OBR costing, and we're still trying to work out where £40 billion is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge has only just begun for the Prime Minister, because he not only needs to put in place measures that calm the markets, and the markets are now expecting them. They're not thinking game over, it's all fine, we now have grown-ups in charge. They expect the grown-ups now to do things, raise some taxes, take some difficult decisions. He needs to get those through his party which has recently been at its own throat. And that's not going to be easy at all, because there are different views about whether taxes or spending should be looked at first. There are even different views about how far you need to go. There will be people who still think that it's not fair that Liz Truss's policy was taken out so quickly. And the most difficult one of all is he needs somehow to separate himself from the government that brought us to all of this catastrophe. So a lot of the people he's sitting around with on the cabinet table would have been banging that table, cheering the quasi-quartane budget of just over a month ago. And now they've already got to be going out on the airwaves with solemn faces saying that, we're taking measures to deal with this, and somehow pretending they're not the same kind of government with the same kind of views. So it's a really difficult balancing act for him to do. And I'm not sure whether it's possible to please all of those objectives at once.
Catherine, a word from you about what I think will be an absolutely fascinating relationship to watch develop, that between the occupants of number 10 and number 11. Once again, and this goes to your own personal experience, we have a Prime Minister who was Chancellor and has a very, very clear idea of the fiscal direction he wants to go in. You have a Chancellor next door trying to sort out a massive crisis. How does it work at times like that when you've got a guy in number 10 who thinks he can do the job at number 11 better than the guy who's in there?
Well, most of the time it works well. During the financial crisis, Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown worked very well together, and they contributed hugely to sort of a global solution. The relationship came unstuck over the domestic policy towards the end of the Labour government. However, I think that there's not much that we know about what Rishi Sunak believes in about the economy. He was, it's unfair actually to put it all on Liz Truss's desk. He was sat in the cabinet. He was partly the architect of this. Jeremy Hunt actually was out of government longer than Sunak was. From what it's a very interesting position that we've got a Prime Minister now who has reached number 10 without giving us his agenda. We don't know what he's about. From what I can see sitting here is that perhaps there's not much ideological difference between Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak. And if that is the case, they should get on fine. The difference between Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown was that Gordon Brown did not think that Alistair should cut the domestic budget as quickly as he wanted to do, and in fact did.
Very good point, very good point. Giles, just a quick word then about the significance, the import of PMQs today. I mean, no one expects this to be Rishi Sunak's best performance. He's only been in the job for 5 minutes, but he does need to come out swinging. Yeah,
he absolutely must do. I mean, they're going to want to be seeing whether there's support for him behind him. So whether they get a huge cheer when he attacks Labour back, the answer to the Suella Braverman question is going to be intriguing. You've got to remember that Keir Starmer had been beating Boris Johnson handily on questions of integrity and responsibility in the conduct of government. He's well practiced at this. He's extremely warmed up for attacking a government that doesn't seem to follow through on the values it's meant to be promoting. And he'll be absolutely wanting to tear into Rishi Sunak. So we've never seen Sunak in such a difficult situation. He's normally had the relatively supportive House supporting his COVID measures, for example, have been his biggest moments. So we're going to see him in circumstances we've never seen before. And a lot of Tory MPs will be very anxious because if he can't stand up to it, as things get worse over the winter and the energy bills rise and mortgage costs go up as well, will he start fraying a bit like the other prime ministers have in the past?
Catherine, then, just a very quick word from you, if we can, because we're just about out of time. What about Starmer? What does he need to do?
Well, Starmer needs to find out what Rishi Sunak is about. He needs to establish perhaps that Rishi Sunak is too rich to be the Prime Minister. Does he understand what is the cost of living crisis that people are experiencing in the country? When Marcus Rashford says children need school dinners because they're starving, does Rishi Sunak understand that that is actually the case? If he can do that, I think the Labour Party will be cheering too. I think Jazz is absolutely right. Of course, the Tories will be cheering when Rishi Sunak stands up in the Commons, but I don't think that they might be hiding quite a few uneasy backbenchers who will not be at all happy that he's there saying what he's going to say.
Catherine MacLeod, Giles Wilkes, lovely to see you both. Thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate your time. Now, a bit of other news for you. You probably picked up on this one. Adidas, well, they have said that they've stopped working with the rapper Kanye West because, in their words, they won't tolerate anti-Semitism or any other type of hate speech. This report from our US correspondent Martha Kellner does include some flash photography and also comments which some people may find offensive.
Kanye West has built a career on being a provocateur, but he has now found the limit of what is acceptable and far beyond that. A barrage of anti-Semitic tirades in recent weeks have made one of the music industry's most successful artists a pariah in his own parish. On a podcast overnight, he was peddling this tired old trope.
There's been times where I had my lawyer was Jewish, my regulator was Jewish, but like 8 people that basically would collude and talk without me were in groups saying, okay, this is what the tour is going to be. This is his next house. And they were making all these decisions and they're making all this money.
West's hate speech comes amid a rise in anti-Semitic incidents in America. This was a protest by Nazis in Los Angeles over the weekend. Kanye is right, one banner says. And Sky News has obtained this video of a group under the cover of darkness distributing anti-Semitic leaflets in an LA neighbourhood. A few of them landed on Sam and Leah Yebri's doorstep.
They spew horrible anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jews being behind COVID or the LGBTQ movement or controlling President Trump.
Do you feel like Kanye West has emboldened this racist hate speak?
He's a walking billboard for this hate.
I mean, the billboard did say Kanye's right, so you have to connect the dots.
Imagine being someone who's been trafficking in anti-Semitism for years and now one of the biggest celebrities in the entire world, validates your ideas. This is a boon for the haters and the bigots out there.
West has now been dropped by his sponsors, dismissed by social media platforms and disavowed by celebrity friends. His ex-wife, Kim Kardashian, writing, hate speech is never okay or excusable, and calling for hateful rhetoric against the Jewish community to come to an end. Adidas were under enormous pressure to terminate their partnership with Kanye West, and they have now done so. They say it will cost them almost $250 million. Financial experts predict it will cost West over $1 billion. In a statement, Adidas said Ye's recent comments and actions have been unacceptable, hateful and dangerous, and they violate the company's values of diversity and inclusion, mutual respect and fairness. Kanye West has decimated his reputation and taken a sledgehammer to his fortune. Even more damaging, he's amplified lies which Jewish people have battled for decades, and from that, his name may never recover. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
People in parts of the UK have been enjoying a partial solar eclipse. A small bite-sized chunk of the sun was obscured by the moon, as you can see, approximately a quarter of its area. People found various ways of looking at it safely, from using special eclipse glasses to some rather more complicated telescopes. The eclipse was seen in several parts of the world, but I'm afraid to say there won't be another one visible in the UK until 2025. Welcome back. The NHS needs you. 26 million people are needing to receive a booster jab this winter. That means 7,000 shifts at vaccination centres across England need filling every week. It is a big, big old task. But joining us now to tell us how you can get involved, the Royal Voluntary Service Director, Fiona Longhurst. Fiona, lovely to see you this morning. Just give us an idea of the scale of the assistance that will be needed to get this booster programme rolling. I mean, we're talking about, everyone over the age of 50 getting a top-up.
That's right. I mean, it's a huge undertaking. We've got 26 million people needing to have their vaccination over the coming months. This week, they hit the 10 million mark, so it's going well. But we need everybody to come forward and have their jabs when they're called. And we need assistance to help get the jabs done. And at Royal Voluntary Service, we're working with the NHS to support that. And we have our steward volunteers who are working with the NHS alongside as part of the team. And they do a fantastic job. They make people feel at ease as they come in to have their vaccination. Not everyone loves that, do they? These steward volunteers do a wonderful job. They bring people through the process, make sure things run smoothly, assist the NHS team working right alongside them. And it's a team role. People really enjoy taking part in this, but it is a huge undertaking. And so far, I think we've done over 300,000 steward shifts through the whole vaccination programme to date. But there's many, many more shifts to do. I think we've got 30,000 in the system up until Christmas. So we do need more hands on deck.
So if people want to get involved and help Fiona, actually, before we ask that, so it is just the steward role. If I apply to kind of come in and join, I'm not going to be given a big needle and starting putting booster shots into people's arms. No, definitely not.
No,
good. So
you're
if that's
not.
the case,
This is what we call a non-clinical role. It's a non-clinical role, so you won't be asked and to put a needle in anyone's arm. Our colleagues over at St John Ambulance do offer that, though, so if everyone wants to do that, they can have a look there. But actually, this is a very straightforward role. You don't need any specialist training. You'll be guided on site as to what you need to do when you arrive, and we provide people with some background information before they even get there. So you'll feel completely at ease.
Good. So how do people get involved then? Where should we be sending them to find out how to apply and to help out?
What they need to do is to head to the website nhsvolunteerresponders.org.uk and follow the process there. This is a very flexible role. You can organise your volunteering on an app, so you need a smartphone to do it, but it does make it incredibly flexible, and that's been a real boon for people. They can organise their shifts around the time they have available.
Fiona, forgive me for being slightly pessimistic, but I'm a journalist who's been covering politics for the past couple of years. Just give us an idea of what might happen if you don't get the numbers, or are you convinced that you're going to get there?
I'm convinced we're going to get there. We've seen nothing but support since we started this endeavour. I mean, we've seen people come through. We have people of all ages and backgrounds, and that's one of the things they love about it. You meet people in your community you wouldn't otherwise meet. And, you're helping your community to boost their immunity at this really important time. And we can't emphasise enough, I think, how tough this winter's going to be. So helping out with this vaccination programme is a real support to your community and to the NHS.
Do you know what, Fiona? I mean, I remember when I went for my first vaccination, the Battersea Arts Centre, and look, I'm fine with needles, I'm fine with injections, but, a little bit of a heart started pumping. The volunteers got me through it. So, look, wishing you all the very best with the campaign. Fiona Longhurst from the Royal Voluntary Service. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And you lot can stay right where you are. At the top of the hour, we will be getting Labour's take on a momentous week in British politics with, just hours to go now, 4 of them, in fact, until the first head-to-head PMQs between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. See you after this.